The conference room at Morrison Associates held 12 people, all watching my guardian sign the final transfer documents for what he called my holdings. "The sale completes Monday," Richard Brennan said, his voice confident as he addressed his divorce attorney, her accountant, and the assembled legal team. "Total proceeds, $5.8 million cash. This resolves the marital asset division and ensures my ex-wife receives her settlement." I sat in the corner, 23 years old, watching a man I'd called Uncle Richard for 18 years liquidate properties I barely understood. The timber holdings in Oregon. The commercial real estate portfolio in Seattle. The mineral rights in Montana. Properties that had been held in trust for me since I was 5 years old, when my parents died in what Richard called a tragic accident. "Emma," Richard's attorney addressed me. "You understand these holdings have significant tax implications if maintained. Liquidation now, before you turn 25, provides optimal financial outcomes." I nodded the way I'd been taught to nod. "Agree. Don't make trouble. Uncle Richard knows best." My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. "Don't sign anything. FBI en route. Director Morrison." I stared at the screen. FBI Director Morrison? Richard was sliding the final signature page toward me. "Just needs your approval, Emma. Then we can close Monday and move forward." My hand was reaching for the pen when the conference room door opened. A woman in a dark suit stepped in, FBI credentials already out. "Richard Brennan?" "Yes." "Who are you?" "Special Agent Sarah Chin, FBI. I need everyone to stop what they're doing. These documents involve property connected to an active federal investigation." Richard's face went pale. "What investigation?" Agent Chin looked directly at me. "The Hayes kidnapping case. Open 1996. Victim, Emily Rose Hayes, age 5. Daughter of Margaret and David Hayes." She paused. "We've confirmed the DNA match. Emma Brennan is Emily Hayes." The room went silent. I couldn't breathe. That's impossible," Richard stammered. "Emma's parents died in a car accident. I'm her legal guardian. I have documentation." "Falsified documentation," Agent Chin said calmly. "Director Morrison is outside with a team. Mr. Brennan, you're under arrest for kidnapping, identity fraud, and attempted theft of assets belonging to Emily Hayes." Everything went dark at the edges. The last thing I heard before passing out was Richard's voice. "She's mine. I raised her. Those holdings are mine." I woke up in a hospital room with an older woman sitting beside my bed. "Emily." Her voice was soft, tentative. I focused on her face. Blonde hair graying at the temples. Blue eyes, the same shade as mine. A small scar on her left cheek just like mine. "I'm Margaret Hayes," she said quietly. "I'm your mother." Everything they told me in the next 6 hours shattered my entire life. I wasn't Emma Brennan. I was Emily Rose Hayes. My real parents hadn't died. They'd been searching for me for 18 years. Richard Brennan wasn't my guardian. He was David Hayes's former business partner, the man who'd kidnapped me in 1996 during a custody dispute after he and my father had a business falling out. The tragic accident that killed my parents never happened. Richard had faked death certificates, created false identities, and moved me across state lines. The trust fund Richard managed? That was my inheritance from my paternal grandparents. $8.3 million in holdings that Richard had been slowly liquidating for years, funneling the money through shell companies. The $5.8 million sale he was about to complete? That was the last of my family's assets. Once that sold, there would be nothing left. And the FBI had found me 3 days ago, purely by chance, when a forensic genealogist working on cold cases uploaded DNA from my childhood medical records and got a familial match to Margaret and David Hayes. Director Morrison, who happened to be David Hayes's college roommate, had personally overseen the investigation that led agents to the law office that morning. "We've been looking for you for 18 years, Margaret said, tears streaming down her face. "We never stopped. Every lead, every tip, every possible sighting. Your father," her voice broke. "He died 2 years ago. He never knew we'd found you." I stared at her, this stranger who was my mother, and felt nothing but numbness. "I don't remember you," I whispered. "I know. You were 5. Richard's a psychologist. He knew how to manipulate memories, create new narratives. But Emily, we have photos, videos, everything. You are ours. You are ours. The holdings are yours. Your paternal grandfather established them for you. When Richard took you, he managed to gain fraudulent guardianship by claiming we were dead. He's been stealing from you for 18 years. Agent Chin appeared in the doorway. Ms. Hayes, Emily, we need to ask you some questions. About your living situation with Richard Brennan. About the properties. About anything you remember. I nodded numbly. This couldn't be real. But the DNA didn't lie. The ghost ledger, what Richard cost. Over the next week, federal investigators reconstructed my stolen life. Financial costs. Original trust value, 1996, $8.3 million in timber, real estate and mineral rights. Current value if properly managed. Estimated $24 million. Amount Richard liquidated over 18 years. $7.1 million. Amount remaining, $1.2 million. The properties he was selling. Money I donated to Richard's various charitable causes. $180,000 over 6 years for my allowance. College fund Richard claimed didn't exist. Actually $400,000 which he'd spent. Emotional costs documented in therapy records. 18 years of manufactured identity. Gaslit memories of parents who were alive and searching. Isolation from extended family who thought I was dead. Psychological manipulation. Richard was a licensed psychologist. Being told my real parents wouldn't have wanted me to be difficult. What they found in Richard's records. Notes documenting how he'd successfully replaced Emily's attachment to biological parents with dependence on guardian figure. Detailed plans for memory suppression and identity reconstruction. Financial projections showing he planned to liquidate all assets by my 25th birthday, then disappear. Divorce filing strategy that positioned my inheritance as marital assets acquired during marriage. The kidnapping. In 1996, Richard Brennan and David Hayes had been business partners in a timber company. They'd had a dispute over company direction. Richard wanted to liquidate holdings for immediate profit. David wanted long-term sustainable management. The partnership dissolved acrimonially. 3 months later, I disappeared from my kindergarten playground. Richard had created an entire identity, Emma Brennan, orphan, tragic car accident, and moved us to California. He'd used his psychology credentials to gain emergency guardianship in a jurisdiction where no one knew the Hayes family. For 18 years, he'd raised me as his ward while systematically stealing my inheritance. And when his marriage fell apart, he decided to liquidate the last $5.8 million to fund his divorce settlement. The pattern had a name. Parental kidnapping. Identity fraud. Financial exploitation of a minor. Psychological abuse. Isolated grooming. He stole your childhood and your fortune, the FBI psychologist told me. He made you believe you were someone else so he could rob you without consequence. The realization. I was 23 years old. Everything I knew about myself was a lie. My name wasn't Emma. My parents weren't dead. My guardian was a kidnapper and thief. And he'd almost gotten away with it. If the forensic genealogist hadn't run that DNA match. If Director Morrison hadn't personally prioritized the case. If the FBI hadn't arrived at that conference room when they did. Richard would have liquidated the last $5.8 million, disappeared, and I never would have known who I really was. The evidence against Richard was overwhelming. Falsified death certificates for Margaret and David Hayes, created in 1996 using a corrupt county clerk Richard had bribed. Guardian papers filed in California under false pretenses, claiming Emma Brennan was an orphan with no living relatives. Bank records showing systematic liquidation of the Hayes family holdings, with proceeds flowing to accounts Richard controlled. Shell companies designed to obscure the theft. Brennan Asset Management, Pacific Timber Holdings LLC, Western Properties Group. Financial projections from Richard's personal files. Full liquidation by subject's 25th birthday. Estimated net to Guardian, $6.2 million after expenses. But the most damaging evidence came from his own notes, kept in a locked file in his home office. Project Emily, Transition Protocol. Phase 1, complete, establish new identity, suppress old memories, create guardian dependence. Phase 2, in progress, liquidate inherited assets, maintain control through trust management. Phase 3, planned final liquidation before subject reaches legal maturity and requests independent financial review. Phase 4, exit strategy: dissolve guardianship, relocate to non-extradition country, maintain anonymous contact to monitor for memory recovery. He'd planned everything, including the moment he'd disappear with my money. The federal prosecutor was Rebecca Morrison, no relation to FBI Director Morrison, but equally passionate about the case. Richard Brennan kidnapped a 5-year-old child, she told the court at his arraignment. He fabricated her death to her biological parents, who spent 18 years searching for her. He psychologically manipulated her into believing she was someone else. He systematically stole $7.1 million of her inheritance. And he was days away from stealing the final $5.8 million and fleeing the country. Richard's attorney argued, "Your Honor, Mr. Brennan raised this child. He provided for her, educated her, cared for her. With her own money," Rebecca interrupted. "Every dollar he spent on her care came from the trust he was stealing. He didn't provide, he embezzled." The judge was the Honorable Thomas Park, who'd worked as a prosecutor on family abduction cases before joining the bench. "Mr. Brennan, the evidence suggests this was one of the most calculated long-term exploitation cases this court has seen. Bail is denied. You're remanded to federal custody pending trial." Richard looked at me as they led him away. Emma, I loved you. I did. I needed the money. I felt nothing." The trial lasted 4 weeks. Margaret testified, showing photos and videos of me as a toddler, as a preschooler, as a 5-year-old playing in the yard of a house I didn't remember. "She loved butterflies," Margaret said, crying. "She'd catch them in the garden and name them. Her favorite was a monarch she called Princess." I looked at my hands. I'd had a butterfly tattoo for years. Princess written in script underneath. I thought it was just a design I liked. Director Morrison testified about the DNA match, the investigation, the race to stop the asset sale before Richard disappeared. Financial analysts testified about the shell companies, the liquidation strategy, the $7.1 million Richard had already stolen. A forensic psychologist testified about the memory manipulation, the identity reconstruction, the psychological abuse inherent in kidnapping and grooming. Richard's ex-wife testified that she discovered the truth during divorce proceedings, found documents Richard had hidden, and had been preparing to go to authorities when the FBI arrested him. "He told me Emma was an orphan," she said. "I believed him for 8 years. Then I found the death certificates. They looked wrong. I searched the names, Margaret and David Hayes, and found news articles about their missing daughter. With a photo of Emma at age 5. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Kidnapping, 25 years minimum. Identity fraud, 15 years. Financial exploitation of a minor, 20 years. Wire fraud for interstate transfers, 20 years. Total sentence, 65 years consecutive. Richard was 54. He'd die in prison. Judge Park addressed him directly. "Mr. Brennan, you stole this young woman's entire childhood. Her identity, her family, her inheritance. You manipulated her mind and robbed her future. The sentence reflects the magnitude of your crimes." Richard said nothing. He was led away, and I still felt nothing. 6 months after the trial, I sat in Margaret's living room, my mother's living room, looking at photo albums. "This was your 6th birthday party," Margaret said softly, pointing to a photo of a little girl in a purple dress. 2 months before Richard took you. You wanted a butterfly cake. We made it ourselves." I stared at the photo. The girl looked happy. I didn't remember her. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I don't remember any of it." "I know." Margaret's voice was gentle. "The therapist says it might come back. Or it might not. Richard was very good at what he did. The money is yours. All of it. We've frozen the sale, recovered what we could. The courts awarded you $1.2 million in remaining assets plus $6.2 million in restitution from Richard's seized accounts and property. It's not everything he took, but it's something. $7.4 million. Less than what should have been mine, more than I'd ever known existed. What do I do with it?" Margaret smiled sadly. "Whatever Emily Hayes would have wanted. Not what Emma Brennan was told to want. You get to figure out who you are now." I looked at the butterfly tattoo on my wrist. Princess. I think I want to go back to school. Study psychology. Help other people who've been manipulated. That sounds like Emily, Margaret said. She always wanted to help people. Over the next year, I worked with therapists to untangle 18 years of manufactured identity. Some memories surfaced. Fragments of the house, my father's voice, the butterfly garden. Others stayed buried. Margaret and I built a relationship slowly. Not mother and daughter immediately, but two people learning to know each other. I changed my legal name back to Emily Hayes. It felt foreign at first, like wearing someone else's clothes. But gradually it started to fit. I enrolled in graduate school for clinical psychology, specializing in trauma and identity recovery. And I established the Emily Hayes Foundation, using the recovered inheritance to fund services for parental abduction survivors, memory recovery therapy, and family reunification support. The first grant went to the forensic genealogy lab that had found me. Your work saved my life, I told them. Let's make sure it saves others. Richard sent letters from prison. Apologizing, explaining, justifying. I never opened them. Director Morrison visited once, 6 months after the trial. How are you doing, Emily? I don't know yet. Ask me in 5 years. He smiled. Your father would be proud. He always said you were the strongest person he knew. I don't remember him. You don't have to remember him to be his daughter. You just have to be yourself. I'm not sure who that is anymore. Then you get to decide. That's what freedom means. 2 years after the trial, I stood at my father's grave with Margaret. I'm sorry I don't remember you, I said to the headstone. But I'm going to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to other kids. I'm going to use the money, our money, to help families like us. Margaret squeezed my hand. He would have loved that. Would he have loved me? The person I am now instead of the person I was supposed to be. Emily, he loved you unconditionally. That doesn't change just because Richard stole 18 years. You're still his daughter. You're still the little girl who loved butterflies. I looked at the butterfly garden planted around the grave. Monarchs drifted between the flowers. One landed on my hand. Hi, princess, I whispered. And for the first time in 2 years I felt something. Not memory exactly, but connection. Richard had stolen my past. But he hadn't stolen my future. I was Emily Rose Hayes. And I was finally going home.